welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. It's been a while since the last episode, so I thought it'd be a good idea to start out with sort of a recap of what's been going on, what's where, and so on. After the last episode or two, I did some messing around with single stage to orbit spaceplanes and whatnot. Did have success in that I got one to actually make orbit that is actually capable of landing. But as yet, I have yet to come up with a spaceplane design that can do single stage to orbit and at the same time carry some kind of useful payload into orbit and have enough fuel and RCS and so on to rendezvous and dock with something. So, Spaceplane program is on the shelf for now. Recapping what's been going on, we have the Discovery in orbit around Duna, as is the Lander 1 and Lander 2 and the Mayflower colony ship in a rather large eccentric orbit. And then we have the Kethane miner, which is en route to Duna. It has an encounter in about 135 days, 130 days or something like that. And let's see, the XD Drive Mark II orbiting Kerbin. That one was the prototype of the current version of the XD Drive, the XD Drive Mark V, which can now successfully lift a Jumbo 64 and a 750-liter monoprop tank into orbit. There is the Fuel 1, which is a space train of several of these ships docked together, and it is in orbit around the sun right now, and when it reaches apoapsis there is a burn scheduled there that should put it onto an encounter with Duna. And then there is the Fuel 2, which is the most recent addition to the fleet. I'll go ahead and fly that one. And this one is the latest in fuel trains. Alright, here is the Fuel 2. There isn't much to see right now because it's on the night side of the planet, but as you can see here, there are 6 of these XD Drive Mark V's docked together. And what I'm planning there is to set up a maneuver node right here at its apoapsis. And let's move this out of the way a little bit. And I'm just going to give this enough thrust forward to get it into a Kerbin escape trajectory. And then it can be dealt with later. It needs to be in a solar orbit to get to the next phase of its mission. So we're just going to start with Kerbin escape and not try anything fancy. Okay, what do we have here? I guess we had a near miss with a moon encounter. Okay, there is our escape trajectory. I'm going to back that off just a little bit and use just enough delta V to get that. I'm going to call that good enough. Alright. The idea here is to just basically get it into a solar orbit, and from there we'll deal with sending it on its way once its actual launch window opens. Okay. As fortune would have it, we appear to be pretty much on the maneuver node. And we have 22 minutes and 30 seconds until the burn. I have already shut down all of the Nerva engines on here, except for the 4 on the front vessel. That will serve as the drive section. So, oh, don't give me this under acceleration thing. We are not under acceleration. There we go. Warping time ahead. I need to allow myself a minute or two ahead of my burn time. I'm going to burn about 5 minutes ahead of the node because I anticipate this being a long burn. So I'll stop acceleration at about T-minus 7. Okay. Alright, it's still on the node, so we'll go ahead and warp ahead further. Don't give me that. We're not under acceleration. I know, SAS is doing it. But if I turn off SAS, I'll lose the alignment with the node. Thinking about 5 minutes before should be just about right. And it looks like that should be indeed about right. Well, maybe 4.5. It's probably going to be at least about a 8 to 10 minute burn. Basically, I want the ship's forward view to be clear of the planet. Okay, just about there. We'll call that good enough right there. Light the main engines, and let's go. .900 meters per second in delta V to burn. Literally tons of fuel to do it with. As 6 fuel tankers make their way into solar orbit. And as I was expecting, we have a long burn, and it can't quite decide just yet how long that's going to be. So I'll be back when the burn is done. Alright, I'm about 5 minutes into this burn, and I have come to a conclusion that this monstrosity, as cool as it looks with 6 of these things docked together, is too much for any kind of advanced SAS to hold aligned to its navigational node. Possibly mechjeb Smart ASS could do it. I don't know, and we won't find out on this flight because there isn't one on this ship. So I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to split this thing into 2 ships right here in the middle, and we will just simply undock and switch to the forward portion of it, and we will recompute our maneuver node and try again. Add a maneuver here. Stretch this thing out for Kerbal escape. See if we can do it without colliding with the moon. What is our moon periapsis? 300 kilometers. Okay. And what does that give us for a solar orbit? Kind of large, but it'll do. Well, wait a minute. Let's see here. I zoomed in too much. Alright, I guess that's going to have to do. It'll get us out there without a collision with the moon, and that's the main thing. So, let's see if we can get this thing around to its maneuver node. It should be a little easier to maneuver than the whole thing with 6 ships attached. Burst of time warp to sort of cheatify and the rotation to stop. And now let's get around towards burn time. We have 11-minute 53-second burn. Burn at about 6 minutes or so. And there's the other part of the ship. The farther away from that we get, the better. The less lag we'll have. I believe it's 2.5 kilometers before that model actually unloads and goes back on rails so that we don't have lag from it. Fine-tune the alignment a little bit, warp in the rest of the way. And we begin our 12-minute burn. I anticipate this one will go better. And I'll be back when the burn is complete. Or something else happens unpredictable. Alright, this burn is going a lot better than the previous attempt. We are on course. And it looks like it's going to turn out just about the way it's planned. We have another 120 meters per second to go. You see our moon encounter is happening here, and it's coming around to a orbit like we planned. This arrangement of 3 of these ships in one train appears to be about optimal. Even if the maneuver node system seems to be a little flaky right now. But I'm sure that's temporary till enough delta V gets burned, which we're very close to that point. 71 meters per second to go. We now have an escape trajectory for the most part. Get fine-tuned around till it matches up with what we've planned. Okay, 40 meters per second to go. Start throttling back. Cut throttle. Okay, I'm going to delete this maneuver node so it will stop blinking. Okay, it looks to me like our moon encounter is going to have a nice high orbit as opposed to the low one that I had originally predicted. So I'm going to go with this. And we'll just time warp ahead and get past the moon to make sure. And then once this one is safely on its way, I'll do another launch with the other section of 3 ships, which I will designate Fuel 3, just for grins. Periaps is 850 kilometers. That should be just fine. Time warp past it. Now we have Kerbal escape, so we'll time warp up to that. Okay. It is now in solar orbit. Okay, good. Now, get the Haystack plug in and see if we can switch over to the other half. I think that's the right one. We're not under acceleration. Thank you very much. SAS off, and let's try that again. Okay. That out of the way. Let's take our lead ship and we'll rename this Fuel 3. It Would be nice if I had the caps lock off. Designate that a ship, and we're good to go. Alright, now Fuel 3 gets the same treatment the other ship did. You burn at periapsis to achieve Kerbal escape. It shouldn't have as much of an encounter problem with the moon as its other ship did. Just because the moon will have moved farther. Just enough for a Kerbal escape. That's exactly what I want. Okay, we'll go with that. All right. Going to repeat the drill with this one. And then, once these two are in their solar orbit, we will turn our attention to the Mayflower. And just to avoid repetitiveness, I'm going to go ahead and take care of this and catch up with you at the Mayflower. And here we are at the Mayflower with the fuel ships finally on their way into a solar orbit. We can turn our attention here. Now, when last we saw, the Mayflower is in a really eccentric, very, very high orbit, 47,000 kilometers at its apoapsis, which puts it, as my best guess, is right around on the edge of doing a sphere of influence. And I can't help but to think that it would be far better if we brought that apoapsis down into something at least roughly circular to ensure that the Mayflower doesn't, by some glitch of the game, if no other reason, get flung out into solar orbit, from which it would have a real hard time recovering. So, I am going to use Smart ASS, and I'm going to have it turn this thing retrograde, and we're going to do a burn to reduce the apoapsis to ensure this thing stays in Duna orbit, but not bring it so low that it has any kind of a chance of having an encounter with Ike that might throw it clear, as happened to the Kethane miner, which otherwise would be on Ike doing its business. All right, coming into position. See if it can settle down and actually hold that. Looks like it will. Good. Alright, now from there, I'm not even going to bother planning a maneuver. I'm just going to burn. Give it about... well, actually, now that we're in position, turn that off. And a burst of time warp to kill the rotation. That may be cheaty, but it works, and I don't care. Alright, now we'll just give it about half throttle. Bring this apoapsis down and see if we can't approximate a circular orbit, even if it is 14,000 kilometers out. Just to make sure this thing doesn't get flung back out into interstellar space, interplanetary space, whatever. Doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to stay in orbit around Duna. 12,000 and 21,000. Much more reasonable. I'll bring the periapsis down to about 8,000. And then we'll cut the throttle and call that good enough. Okay, 7,000. That's fine. The main thing is, it isn't going anywhere. Alright, shut that off. And we can just leave this thing parked here. And now let's haystack over to fuel 1.